This is the Forbidden Knowledge News premium episode. To get access to this and many more, visit forbiddenknowledge.news or just click the link in the description. All premium episodes are available in the movie section of our social media site. Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight I want to welcome Joshua P. Warren. At the age of 13, he wrote his first published book. Since then, he has published dozens more, including the regional bestseller Haunted Asheville, Simon & Schuster's How to Hunt Ghosts, and his 2015 bestseller Use the Force, A Jedi's Guide to the Law of Attraction. He's the president of a multimedia production company, Shadowbox Enterprises, LLC, and his articles have been published internationally. He has appeared on the National Geographic Channel, History Channel, Discovery, Travel Channel, Sci-Fi, Animal Planet, TLC, and numerous network affiliates of NPR, ABC, NBC, and CBS. He is also an international award-winning filmmaker, including Hollywood.com's Top Underground Filmmaker of 1998. As founder of the Wishing Machine Project, he has helped thousands of people around the world manifest their goals using radionics and mind-body environment relationship. Joshua, welcome. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Well, thanks so much, man. I'm looking forward to this. I was actually trying to get you on for a while. I don't know if I was using the wrong email or something, but I'm so excited. Some of my favorite guests are those that are of the mindset that whether you're dealing with ghosts, aliens, psychic abilities, magical practices, there's somehow some profound connection between these phenomenon. And myself, I've recently had one of my first contact experiences ever. I've always been interested in the phenomenon. I've been doing this show for years, and I've never had my own real paranormal experience until recently. And it gives me a whole new insight into the phenomenon. And for each show, you know, it feels good to have like an insight into someone who's actually had an experience, because it's completely different once you've experienced yourself than trying to understand something that someone else's account of something. So I'd like to start out tonight with what first got you started interested in this? What got you down this path?
Well, you know, I was born and raised in the mountains of Asheville, North Carolina, the Blue Ridge Mountains. And my family on both sides have been in that area since the late 1700s, so for hundreds of years. And so I grew up in a place that was very rich with a lot of old pioneer folklore, Native American tales, a lot of haunted places. I mean, I was about an hour down the road from the site of what they call the Brown Mountain Lights, which are these mysterious balls of light that appear floating on and around this ridge at night. And to this day, no one has been able to explain for certain what they are. Some people said they were spirits. Others said they were UFOs. Some people said they were portals to other dimensions. And so I grew up in a place that was kind of rich with that tradition. Not to mention the fact that where I grew up is aligned with a lot of paranormal phenomena. You've got Brown Mountain there in the western part of the state. If you draw a line east, in the middle of North Carolina, you have a place called the Devil's Tramping Ground, which is this big barren spot of earth where nothing will grow. And they say the devil walks around at night mulling over what he's going to do to humankind to punish them. And then you finally hit the coast of North Carolina, and that's where we have the first attempt at an English settlement, and they all disappeared. It's known as the Lost Colony. And you continue drawing that line out, and you finally hit the island of Bermuda, which is the top point of the so-called Bermuda Triangle. And so I was very familiar with these strange things. A lot of bizarre stuff happened in my own family over the years. I had a great uncle, for example, who was photographed in the 1930s. When the photograph developed, he was missing a head. Nobody could explain how that happened. And 1 month later, on a July afternoon, 1936, he was having a conversation through an open window with his father while his father was fixing them lunch. And his father went out to deliver the lunch, and he was gone. That was my great uncle, Claude Calloway. He had vanished right in mid-sentence. His magazine was still there on the porch, and he was never seen or heard from again. He was in his early 20s, and it just seemed like he'd been abducted or raptured away or whatever. And this was a big tragedy in my family. Obviously, this is long before I was born, but they never had closure. And it was always this big mystery. Well, what the heck happened to Claude? And so I was curious about this stuff. I accepted the paranormal and the mysterious as a part of reality. And so as a teenager, I started writing scary short stories and poems that actually got published. By the time I was 15, I got a job working for the largest newspaper in the region, the Asheville Citizen-Times. And that gave me a lot of research that I turned into the book Haunted Asheville, which I published at the age of 18, which was the first book of Asheville ghost stories. And that became a big, big hit, got a lot of attention. I started getting invitations to do a lot of TV programs. And yet at that time, I still had never seen a ghost. I continued going to haunted places and doing research for years. And I was, I think, 23 years old before I ever finally saw a ghost. And, that was a life-altering experience for me. And since then, I have continued to investigate ghosts, and I found they connect with UFOs and psychic phenomena and cryptids and angels and demons and all these things that people talk about and use as descriptions. And I've found that basically, if you keep looking long enough, you will have experiences, but they don't happen as often as you might be led to believe by watching TV.
Right. It's like this hidden part of our reality that exists at all times. You just beyond the spectrum of our vision or something like that.
Well, sure. And, the funny thing is we call it paranormal because it doesn't happen that often. And that's why I think a lot of people are misled by the TV programs. And trust me, I mean, I've been on, as you mentioned, all the different TV shows, and I'm happy to do that. But there's a big difference between real research and entertainment. And what I mean in particular is that over the years, and I've been investigating this stuff professionally now for, 25, 30 years, something like, I can't remember exactly how long. But what happens is in that period of time, if you're really fortunate and you're out there constantly, you may see something that's truly profoundly paranormal once or twice a year. And so when you have a television show and you basically have to deliver a product on a weekly basis to get your paycheck, people go out and they exaggerate thought. And so a lot of people might watch some of the TV programs and say, well, come on, there's a more reasonable explanation for this. It's not some horrible demon growling. It's the guy's stomach growling or whatever, And so what I found is that it's easy to dismiss the paranormal if you're just looking at the entertainment side of it. When you start investigating it the way I have, and of course I've done my best to use a scientific approach. I use Occam's razor. I rule out the most obvious common explanations first. When you use that approach, what you find is that you can explain over 90% of the things that people don't understand. But it's that less than 10% that is that's the window into the other dimensions, into the unseen world around us. And it's fascinating to think that we are so egocentric that we are only aware through our physical senses of this tiny, tiny slice of what is available to quote unquote see or hear or feel. And so we have to open our minds and say, look, we are not the dominant species in the universe. We have all these other creatures that are inferior, so to speak, to humans. Right now, a rat or a squirrel would not understand the conversation we're having. So there are other things out there which are bigger than people, and we can't grasp exactly what they are, but we do come into contact with them and these forces from time to time.
Now, earlier you mentioned that you didn't have your first encounter till you or were a little bit older in your 20s. Could you talk about that encounter? What happened?
Absolutely. Over the years, I always prided myself on being a good investigator and telling a good account of what happened, interviewing people. And of course, when it comes to a lot of the paranormal, it's mainly based upon people's experiences. I mean, how do you know a place is haunted if somebody doesn't come out and say, hey, I saw a ghost here? You're relying on people to throw out the alert. And so I always did a good job of documenting things, but I would show up to these places and I never saw a ghost myself. And so I got to the point where I thought maybe some people are capable of seeing ghosts and others are not. Maybe it takes a certain combination of rods and cones in your eyes, or maybe there are certain parts of the synapses that have to fire in a particular pattern in the brain. And I'm coming up with all these possibilities for why I wasn't able to see ghosts. And then all that changed when I was contacted by a young woman who was a college student in Asheville who had just moved into a small old house. And she, of course, moved in by herself. And as she was moving in, she saw what she thought was an intruder, some type of a form of a man that was in her house. And so this scared her, and she ran out and she called 911. And the cops came and they found no evidence that anybody was there. And as time went on, she started getting glimpses of what she thought was a person around, and it started freaking her out quite a bit. And she was, of course, was telling all of her girlfriends. And so they were coming over to the house and they started seeing this thing, which often would appear as kind of a cloudy or misty form. And they started taking pictures all around the house. And these are some of the most impressive pictures I've ever seen of a paranormal manifestation. I mean, these big, like wispy forms sweeping through the house, sometimes sweeping through individuals. And I've spent many, many years. And you mentioned I have even won awards in filmmaking and TV production. I was in a production just last year that won an Emmy. And so I have a lot of different cameras, and I'm always testing them out. And I'm out there and I am taking stills and video and everything you can imagine, infrared, ultraviolet, of dust, of rain, of snow, of every type of typical thing, fog, everything that would create some type of an impression of something paranormal that's not paranormal. I was looking at her pictures and I could not figure out what was causing these big phantasmal forms. And so I said, well, let me come to your house and I'll just take some measurements. So I have a bunch of gear. I'm a geek. I love the gear. I have warehouses full of gear, everything. I even invent gear. I have brand new stuff that only I have that I use. And so I went to her house and I started scanning the entire environment. Were you going to say something?
Oh no,
are you there?
no, I didn't say anything.
Okay, I thought I heard your voice. Maybe we got a little EVP pop in there. So anyway, as I'm scanning her house with various instruments, and I started getting these very bizarre burst of electromagnetic energy, and I couldn't explain where they were coming from. And I did find that there were some odd electrostatic fields that would sometimes rove around, but I didn't see anything. So she was so convincing, though, that there was something there, that I kept up with her. And one night she woke up and this thing was, well, this misty form was in the bed with her. And that's when she'd had enough. And she left the house and she said, I am not going back into this house. I'm going to have to sell this place or whatever unless something can be done to get rid of this thing. So I told her that I was not a ghost buster per se. I'm not an exorcist. I've never claimed that I can get rid of a ghost. I just study it. And so I went into her house and I was taking measurements on a second occasion. And at one point, I was up in the attic with another researcher. His name was Rob. And I just so happened to be in the attic. I was going all over the house. And she had a pretty good sized attic. And Rob said, "Josh, look." And I turned, and he and I were about 3 feet apart. And right there between us was this big blue-gray, misty form just hovering and swirling in the air right there between the two of us. And so, at it from one angle, I'm seeing it from the other. We're both absolutely mesmerized. Okay, there was no like shock of fear, no adrenaline. It was just like total confusion. We're looking at this thing, and my mind was just going through the filing cabinet. Like, there has to be a logical explanation for what I'm seeing. There has to be a logical. And I reached out and touched it. And when I touched it, it felt icy cold in the middle. It made the hair on my knuckles stand up, electrostatically speaking. And it kind of, the surface of it, and I always have difficulty trying to explain this, but being that close to it, the surface of it had these kind of little facets that would sort of shift around. They're almost like fluid geometric facets that would kind of slide and slip around. It was very, very weird. So I'm touching it from one side. Rob's touching it from the other side. So we're both touching this thing. And then it started to get dimmer and dimmer. And this is over the course of 30 to 60 seconds, which is quite a long time. And that's when I realized, oh man, I have a camera around my neck. This whole time I had a camera. And so I was able to snap a shot of this thing just before it completely disappeared. If anybody wants to see that picture and many others, if you go to joshuapwarren.com, of course, I have a bunch of stuff on my website, but there's a section there called let's see, I've had 2 or 3 sections on my website. I'm not sure where I have that one filed. Let me check real quick.
That has to be amazing, though. I mean, I know, for me, I was dumbfounded with my contact experience, and having seen that as your first experience had to have been something that changed your life, basically.
Oh, it did. So that section that picture is filed under is called Gallery of the Strange. You'll see on my homepage, there's a bunch of different stuff. There's TV and books and curiosity shop, and it's kind of cluttered. But when you go there and you see this image, I mean, you can imagine how sort of impressed I was that she had been telling me what she and all her friends were seeing. And here I was in a situation where I got to see it. Another person got to see it from another angle. We both got to touch it, and I was able to get a picture of it. Now, short of having the Ghostbusters trap that I can kick out there to suck the ghost in and release it in my museum, I don't know what else I could have done at that point in order to prove that there was a real ghostly phenomenon. And I cannot say to you of a dead person, but ghosts don't necessarily have to be spirits of once living things. As a matter of fact, some of the most prominent ghosts are ghosts of inanimate objects, like ghost ships or stagecoaches, that kind of thing. Or, that may also account for why ghosts don't show up naked. I mean, they're wearing clothes, which are inanimate objects in many cases. There are some naked ghosts, but that's a different story. And so I was really impressed. I told her, I said, okay, we saw it. And it was just like, such a big, huge relief for her to have that sort of validation that's, she's not crazy, that these other guys came in and saw this thing and documented it. And, but again, I was frustrated because now that I know this is real, it's like, now I want to document it even more. I got to get even more serious about trying to capture these things that are happening. And in terms of that particular case, I did end up hooking her up with a minister who specialized in clearing places. And he went there and did a ritual. And after that, she had no activity for about 6 months. And then after that, she said that there were some occasions where some spooky things still happened, but nothing like before. So to this day, she still lives in that house. But that was what I really needed to completely whet my appetite. And I have gone nonstop. I've been self-employed since I was 18 years old, going out and just professionally traveling the world and investigating all of these things, because I found, as you mentioned, that if you look to, say, I love that quote by the great researcher Charles Fort, you can measure a circle beginning anywhere. And no matter what avenue takes you into the world of the paranormal, whether you get into it through ghosts like I did, or you get into it through UFOs or cryptids or psychic phenomena, whatever doorway you enter, if you are serious enough, if you stick with it long enough, you will eventually find that they all do connect. They have a common overlap to some degree. And we can get more into that if you'd like, but the key component that they all have in common is time and the manipulation of time and therefore space. That's what they all have in common.
Well, I was going to get into that a little bit later, but now that you mentioned that, I'm kind of interested into getting a little bit further into that right now.
Okay, so I've really been interested in how that, time and time warping is something that makes the imagination fire. It inspires all kinds of creative people and science fiction enthusiasts, and yet some of our most esteemed scientists say, look, time is an illusion. It is a flexible thing, that one's perception of past, present, and future depends solely upon that particular observer's position, that all time, supposedly, past, present, and future, is more or less happening at once. And we are just experiencing it moment by moment because that's all that our brains are capable of processing. And of course, they say they have the math to prove it. I doubt either one of us could understand the equations, but
Right.
they feel rather confident about it. And so, on one hand, that it may seem a little bit disappointing to believe that, because then you may think, well, okay, well, if everything is happening at once, then that suggests that everything is predetermined, that you have no choice, no free will, so what's the point in trying? But there may be another option here, which is perhaps there are multiple timelines, and each timeline is predetermined, but the joy of being a conscious individual is that you're able to sometimes switch from one timeline to another, what we think of as make a choice, and that gives us the ability to experience all these different outcomes. But that said, the mind is kind of like a little time machine. So when you're thinking about what you had for breakfast yesterday, you're mentally traveling back in time. If you're about to cross the street and you're trying to figure out whether or not it's safe to go because you're gauging how fast the automobiles are that are traveling left and right, you're envisioning possible future scenarios and trying to avoid the one in which you are splattered all over the pavement. And so it's a form of looking into possible future scenarios. So that said, let's apply this to the experience of encountering something paranormal. Well, let's start with ghosts. Most of the time when someone sees a ghost, they are seeing something from the past. They are seeing a person as he or she once existed. That person is now dead and rotting in the grave. And yet when you see that person, you see that person as that person was in the past. Also, there are ghosts of the future. And I wrote about this in my book, How to Hunt Ghosts, which these are sometimes spirits that come back and literally say, I'm from the future and I'm here to warn you, like some kind of a harbinger of something bad that may happen so you can avoid it. So it's easy to see time with ghosts. Sometimes people look back and instead of seeing a ghost, they see the ghost of an entire town or a whole scene with trees and houses and horses and wagons. And, sometimes, it's like a time slip. So it's a ghostly experience on a grand scale. Now, when it comes to, say, UFOs, well, obviously a lot of people encounter or talk about having missing time when they encounter a UFO. But even more blatantly than that, you have, the scenario like was sort of portrayed in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You have these stories about, the guy in Texas who's driving down a dark road at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday night, and all of a sudden here there is this gigantic saucer hovering over the road, and his truck stops working. Now he's sitting there and he is seeing this thing floating, but the truck stops working. And then the saucer flies away and the truck starts working again. He doesn't have to turn the ignition. It's not like it killed the engine on the car and then or the truck, and he had to start it up again. No, it's like it paused that machine. And then when it flew away, it unpaused it. And in fact, if you think of it that way, you could say that maybe the reason the guy is able to maintain consciousness is because, like I say, he's different than the truck. His brain is its own little independent time machine, which is affected in a different way. There are also all kinds of examples of time warps, which is, I discovered a time warp here on my way to Area 51, which we can get into that if you'd like at some point. But basically, there's an old scene from one of the X-Files where, a flying saucer comes over an area and then flies away, and later, I think it's Mulder or whatever, takes two stopwatches and he syncs them up, and he takes one to the site where the UFO was seen, and then when he brings it back and compares it, they're out of sync. So, but you have that sort of situation reported in the real world, where people say when a UFO shows up, it throws off the time a little bit. So whatever technology these UFOs are using or taking advantage of seems to possibly warp time and space. So there you have it clearly in that component. When it comes to cryptids, how many times do we have these stories where people say, I saw Bigfoot, and then all of a sudden he disappeared, and I ran over and I saw his footprints going down the trail, and then all of a sudden they just stopped. Where did he go? Where did this 8-foot tall, 1,000-pound creature go all of a sudden? Well, it seems like that if we are to believe these stories, that the only explanation is that somehow Bigfoot changed his point in space. And since space and time are two ends of the same coin, now we have time in there again. When it comes to psychic phenomena, it's no different. People are talking about precognition or postcognition, seeing into the past, seeing into the future. It's always time being warped and manipulated in some way. And it may be that the most grand example of all this is what people nowadays like to call the Mandela effect, meaning that it's possible somewhere out there, somebody in the future is playing with the timelines, and we see little nuanced changes in the world on a sometimes day-to-day basis. A product exists that you enjoyed as a kid, and the next day it doesn't, and then the next day it's back again. Or one day you watch a report and a celebrity has died, and then 2 days later the celebrity's alive again and you can't find the report. There are all kinds of examples of this, and so as you can see, I could go on, but hopefully that is a pretty good overview of how that time seems to be the core of all these things.
Yeah, that is absolutely fascinating, and it makes a lot of sense whenever you put it into that perspective. And also, based on some of the information I've received from my contact experience, I've received it was almost spot on to what you were saying about time. So that resonates really, really, really strongly with me. I want to get into how that could relate to different types of hauntings, especially the ones that you've dealt with. You hear of poltergeist, having the ability to move objects, or houses that have residual negative energy. I'm wondering, what types you've dealt with, and if you've ever dealt with any of the spirits that actually have consciousness that you can interact with, that seem to be, I guess, a spirit of someone that may still be around.
Yes, and in fact, if I look back at my life, and it's also important to point out that over the years, I mean, I would go probably every year to at least between 50 and 100 really haunted places. So you're talking about not necessarily spending as much time as you might like at a haunted place, but I've been to a lot of places in a lot of different situations. And out of all that, there have only been 3 or 4 times where I've had one of those like big life-altering moments. And the first one, when it comes to ghosts, was the one I told you about. The second one, which happened after that, was when I went to a poltergeist-infested house in South Carolina, and for the first time was able to witness objects flying off walls. And the first time I was there, there was a little decorative dove that was on the wall right in front of me and another researcher, and it just launched off the wall, hit the floor, shattered into pieces. I mean, it was like you could feel this shock wave in the room, and I was so disappointed that I did not get that on camera that I went back there and took a whole army of investigators with me, with cameras rolling, and we did capture some poltergeist activity. So we did capture objects being moved. And so there's no doubt about it. I mean, when objects just go flying off a wall or tumble off a chair or something like that, it's really dramatic because there's no real question about what you witnessed. And that's another thing that is valuable about videotaping things. Most of the things that have been really profound that I've seen, I've been able to videotape or take a picture or document it in some way. Because if you don't do that, I don't care how amazing your experience is. I think that if it's extraordinary enough, you're liable to turn around, a year later and doubt yourself. But the third big thing, which was, this was the life-altering of life-altering, because when I saw that mist, as I mentioned, I would certainly define it as a ghost, as an apparition of some kind. You see a misty thing floating around in an attic, you say, okay, I'll call that a ghost. When you see objects flying off the walls, you can say, okay, that's a poltergeist, but you still don't know for sure what's causing it. If you really want to play devil's advocate, you could say, well, maybe there's some mysterious atmospheric phenomenon that creates a mist like this. Or maybe there is some type of electromagnetic geologic burst at some places that makes objects fly around. Like you can try to rationalize it. But this next experience I had, this is the one where I was like, okay, this cannot be rationalized. I've been doing a lot of TV shows at this point, and I was hired to appear on a TV show as the investigator of a very Francisville, Louisiana. People listening to us probably know about this place. It's called Myrtle's Plantation.
Yes, I've actually been there. I spent the night there myself.
Okay, excellent. Do you remember what room you stayed in?
Oh, I think it was General Beauregard, I believe. Oh,
well,
man, I think.
My story happened in the General David Bradford suite. And I don't know how many, there are a lot of rooms, and I'm sure several are named after different generals.
Right, yeah.
But I'll never forget the name General David Bradford. I'd never heard of him before, but I'll never forget that name. So I was hired to go there and spend a couple nights investigating this place with a crew following me around. However, I was scheduled to get there a day before the crew. And so I arrived by myself at I guess it was the Baton Rouge airport. When I got there, it was just a terrible, terrible stormy day. I mean, I think there were even some tornadoes around. I mean, it was not a pleasant introduction. I mean, I got in the car and the rain was pounding so hard I could hardly see where I was going. The sun was going down. I almost died on the drive there because a bridge had washed out. And my car was the first car to get to this spot. And so I kind of hydroplaned to a stop. And if I hadn't done that, I would have tumbled off and, who knows, probably drowned in this gushing river. So I had to take a big detour. And so, listen, by the time I got to Myrtle's plantation, I was never so relieved to be at a famous or infamous haunted place. I got out and, there was a big pack of black cats roving around. I mean, this is like something out of a Stephen King novel at this point. And turns out because they were going to do the TV shoot, they had reserved the whole place. There were no guests. And so when I got there, there was a staff member who said, finally, glad you're here, gave me the keys and said, have a good night, and left me there. And I had the entire property to myself. I mean, which I thought that was pretty amazing. I mean, I could have stolen every valuable thing out of that house if I wanted to, So here I am left alone in the middle of this storm, which went on all night long, in this big, creepy, famous haunt. And I was very tired, very weary. And so I could have, and so I'll start by telling you, when I went into the bedroom, the General David Bradford suite, it was one of those where you walk inside and there is the big painting on the wall with the eyes that follow you, and the 4-poster Ebenezer Scrooge bed.
Yeah.
The ceiling was 15 feet high. I mean, it was a very dramatic room to be in, and I could have just pretty much settled in because I went to like a little diner down the road and got some food, and I could have just settled in and gone to bed, but I was like, you know what? I came here to do an investigation. I have this amazing opportunity where I have this whole property to myself. So all the lights were turned out, and any light that I saw that was on, I turned off, and I turned on my camera with the night shot feature. And I walked all over that giant plantation house by myself in the dark. That was pretty damn spooky. But I didn't see anything paranormal. When I got back to my room and closed the door, I had 2 or 3 meters, and one of them was picking up this very pronounced electromagnetic field. And by the way, I make a big deal out of saying that when I use a piece of technology, I understand that technology. A lot of people run around with an EMF meter, and if you say, okay, well, what is an electromagnetic field? They look at you like a deer in headlights. They don't really understand what an electromagnetic field is or how a meter works. And I'm not trying to criticize people who are like that. I'm just saying that when I tell you I'm getting something anomalous on one of these meters, I really know what I'm talking about. And so I was picking up some very strange bursts. Now I realized there was a thunderstorm, there was lightning in the distance that can cause all kinds of interference. I'm being mindful of all this. And as I'm standing there in the dark, all of a sudden I hear boom, boom, which I presumed was on the door. Okay, I almost jumped out of my skin. And this was getting late. This is probably between 10 and 11 o'clock at night. So, of course, I went over, I opened the door. There was nobody there. The rain's still pouring outside. I went over and looked outside. There was no evidence of anybody. There was no car. There was nothing around. So I walked back in. I've got my camera rolling. And boom, boom, boom. There it is again, except now it sounds like it's coming from a different spot on one of the walls of the room. And I said out loud into the darkness, "Is there someone here in this room?" Boom, boom, boom. Now at that point, a chill ran down my spine, and I said, "If there is someone in this room with me, will you please do that again?" Boom, boom, boom. This is when that fight or flight instinct kicks in.
Right.
This is when you really test your salt, like, I mean, there was an overwhelming instinct for me to just turn around and get out of that room. Just, I don't know why that happens, but I felt like I need to be out of this situation for a minute. But I was able to force myself to stay there. And as freaky as this is to be in this situation, I realized, okay, this is what I'm here for. This is what I do. And this began a whole night of interaction with this thing in this room, where I would ask it, okay, knock on that table. Do, do, do. Okay, now knock on this wall. Do, do, do. Okay. It was always in threes. I tried to see if I could communicate with it. I said, like, okay, knock once for yes or twice for no. But it was always three. Do, do, do. I didn't know why that was. Later, I started doing research, and there's one theory out there that sometimes bad spirits, sacrilegious spirits, they knock in threes because it mocks the Holy Trinity. And so I don't know about that, but that makes it even scarier.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And in that house that, you may have remembered, they have all the keyholes turned upside down.
Yes.
Because people believed that would confuse ghosts and they couldn't go through doors and all that kind of thing. So this went on for hours. And at this point, there was no doubt in my mind whatsoever that I was communicating with an intelligent, aware, free, unpredictable, disembodied intelligence of some kind. There was no doubt in my mind. And this went on until I was so just dead dog tired, because I didn't get much sleep the day before and everything. I finally had to go to bed. And so I was thinking, see, to me, it's one thing to stand in a room when you're kind of prepared and you've got a camera and some meters and document something like this. I don't want to wake up in the middle of the night and have some freaking ghost standing there next to the bed. Like, that's too far. I said, if I wake up and this thing is standing here next to the bed, I'm out of here. That's it. I'm going to go sleep in my car the rest of the night. So I laid down to go to bed. And the last thing I remember was about 8 o'clock in the morning, this thing banged on the headboard of the bed right next to my head. And ironically, as a guy who has spent his life out there trying to see this stuff and document this stuff, it was the only time in my life I ever actually asked a ghost to stop giving me evidence at that point. And that was it. I said, please stop. And then it never happened again. So the next day, the film crew arrived. They came in, I think, from Tennessee. And when they got there, I told them, I said, guys, you're not going to believe the night that I had last night. And I said, oh, we're going to have a hell of a show. Hell of a show. So that night, we had cameras all over to document this. And of course, it was the most peaceful, uneventful night you can possibly imagine, where like nothing happened. And so that said, that was a huge paradigm shift for me, because I could no longer even attempt to rationalize these effects that I'd witnessed, these paranormal effects, as being anything other than some interaction with spirits or another realm. And so anybody who experiences that, I mean, it's like I know they say you have to see it to believe it for a lot of people. Well, let me tell you, if that happens to you, you don't need anybody else to tell you that ghosts are real. I mean, you know after that.
Oh yeah, I definitely imagine so. Yeah, my visit was pretty peaceful itself. I didn't experience anything much, although it was really nice atmosphere and nice to spend time out there. It did have a kind of eerie vibe at night, and I myself did get access to after hours access with supervision to kind of do my own little investigation, although I'm nowhere near a professional paranormal investigator, but it was fun and, it was a great experience. Earlier, you had mentioned demons, and I think that demons are profoundly misunderstood to a lot of people. There's a lot of dogma behind it. I'd like to know, what are your thoughts on demons, and what are they, and can demons possess people? What are your thoughts? This is the Forbidden Knowledge News premium episode. To get access to this and many more, visit forbiddenknowledge.news or just click the link in the description. All premium episodes are available in the movies section of our social media site.